Okay, now that we've talked about the origins of many of the characters that we still have in comedy, I'd like to talk about what I call the comedy continuum. The comedy continuum, I first learned in a graduate class when I was working on my MFA at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And I found the idea of the continuum to be very helpful when analyzing a comic script or working on a comic script as a director or as an actor. What we talked about in the beginning of this lecture is that comedy is very personal, that for something to be funny, we have to understand it, and yet at the same time be removed from it. When you look at the comedy continuum, you now can understand a little more what this means. We're going to take comedy from its lowest levels, which we call farce, to its highest levels, which we call high comedy. Farce is believable only in the story where it exists. In other words, whatever happens in farce probably would not happen in real life. It exists and is believable in the world where it takes place. High comedy may be unreal, but quite often is. It's just exaggerated. And it's exaggerated so that we will understand the comedy. The lowest level of comedy is obscenity. Now, when I'm talking about obscenity, I'm not really talking that it has to be filthy. Yes, in our modern times, a lot of the things that are in obscenity may cause some people problems in our society. But obscenity, because it's the lowest level of comedy, requires the least amount of thought. In fact, most children's humor, I'm talking about little kids out on the playground, little tiny kids, most of the things that they find funny fall in the area of obscenity. Most of their jokes are about things coming out or going in to orifices on the body. We're talking puking. We're talking earwax. We're talking farts. Yes, I said the word farts. We're talking poo. We're talking pee. Or if it makes you feel better, pee-pee. This all fits into the area of obscenity. This is stuff that I am sure cavemen laughed at. Certainly little kids do. I mean, if you want to make a kid happy, make a fart noise. I mean, you can go up to a little baby and go, and they will laugh. They will think that is the funniest thing they ever saw or heard. It takes nothing but the sound of gas passing, and little kids think it is hilarious. I mean, they work on ways to make those noises, and they do it and they laugh at it. So obscenity, the lowest level of comedy, the lowest level of farce, requires no thought. because we're talking about bodily functions. I want you to go on YouTube, and I want you to look at some scenes. And there's 2 scenes that I'm going to give you. There are many more, but there are 2 that I want you to look at, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. The first is from a Mel Brooks movie called Blazing Saddles. And Blazing Saddles, and Mel Brooks in particular, has no problem in any movie going from the lowest level to the highest level. And I should talk about that. No one movie is one level of comedy. No one play is one level of comedy. They run the gamut from the lowest to the highest in just about every film that you see, just about every play that you see that's funny. It uses all these levels. But I'm breaking it down for you so that you can understand what makes us laugh, what is funny. So I want you to see in Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles the infamous bean scene. And what's hilarious about this is in cowboy movies, if you go back to traditional cowboy movies, at the end of the day when they're eating supper, they all sit around the campfire, and what do they eat? Beans. And they live on a diet of beans. That's all we ever see them eat. And as you know, if you live on a diet of beans, things are gonna happen. Mel Brooks explored that, and he used it in the Blazing Saddles film. So you watch that scene. We're gonna the YouTube address is going to be posted here. You go and check that out. Bean scene, Blazing Saddles, Mel Brooks. It's funny. Censors in the United States over the years have not allowed certain things to happen on television. For example, the very funny show All in the Family, when it came out in the 70s, it was the first television show that allowed us to hear a toilet flush. We didn't see it, we just heard it flush. And the censors had a hard time allowing that to happen. I mean, that really was, we're pushing the envelope. When Blazing Saddles went from film and then was shown on network television for the first time, the censors said they couldn't play the fart noise. They wouldn't allow that. Oh, nothing's happening. There we go. They wouldn't allow that noise on television. So what they did was they inserted burp sounds instead, because they thought that that the censors approved that. And when I saw that for the first time, I thought that was probably a lot more obscene than if we'd have just heard the sounds of farting. But they'd lean up and that it looked pretty rough. Now, another example that I want you to check out is from a British television show, and it's for kids. My children watch this show and they love it. It's a series called Horrible Histories. And they're brilliant. It's a comedy group. It's if you've never seen it, it's like watching Saturday Night Live if they only did stories about history. And it's called Horrible Histories because they tell a lot of facts, a lot of things that happened in history that will not be in the history books. And the one that I want you to watch is called Roman Toilets. And Everything they show you in Horrible Histories is the truth. Or as they say, they have a little rat puppet who takes you through the stories. He's the narrator, and as he says, it's accurate. Well, it is accurate. It's very funny. The Romans believed in public toilets where both men and women all just sat together and did it while they're looking at one another. And they do a scene. This scene is very funny about a young man who has never been in the public toilets before, going in with all these other people, strangers, sitting around looking at him. So watch Horrible Histories, and then Rotten Romans, the Roman toilet scene. And I think you'll get a really good idea of how children and adults respond to obscenity. The next level of comedy is called physical mishap. Now, this is also, we're in farce, we're still in low comedy. Physical mishap is also called slapstick comedy, and it gets its name from Harlequin's slapstick. The slapstick was used to hit people with. That is what physical mishap is. It's hitting one another, it's poking people in the eyes, it's pulling noses, pulling ears, grabbing hair, knocking people down, pratfalls, all make up physical mishap or slapstick comedy. Again, it requires very little thought. The only thing that the actor has to be aware of when you're doing physical comedy, physical mishap, is the audience can never think the actor is being hurt. They must believe it's just the character. So when Moe of the Three Stooges pokes Curly in the eyes, we have no fear that when he pulls his fingers out that we're going to see, the eyes exploding out of his head, that he's actually blinded him. They do things like the sound effects that are made. For example, when he pokes Curly in the eyes, they use a sound of a violin string being plucked. So it is not a realistic sound. It's very, very obviously a fake sound, and therefore we're not worried about that Curly is actually going to go blind. The character's been poked, but not the actor. Two scenes I want you to see. One is from the Three Stooges. The Three Stooges were masters of slapstick comedy. And one of their shorts, I think, is excellent. And it's called Punch Drunks. And I want you to watch the very beginning of their short, Punch Drunks. It's a great scene where Curly plays a waiter in a restaurant. Larry is a musician who's hungry, who comes into the restaurant and is playing his violin. And Moe plays a fight promoter, a fight manager. And he is there with several of his disgruntled employees, several fighters who are not very happy with him. Watch what happens in that film. It's excellent use of slapstick comedy, and I think you'll enjoy it. The other one I want you to watch is another comedy team, Laurel and Hardy. Laurel and Hardy were just wonderful comedians. They worked not only in vaudeville, like the Three Stooges, but they did a lot of work in silent films. In fact, their first shorts were all silent. And then when they got sound, they continued to make movies. they have a short, it actually won an Academy Award, called The Music Box. It's about two movers who are trying to move a piano up a set of stairs to get to a house, and then to take the piano up another set of stairs to get it in the house. It's hilarious. I hope that you enjoy it. Again, Laurel and Hardy, The Music Box, and The Three Stooges, Punch Drunks. Great examples of physical mishap, or as we call it, slapstick comedy. The next level of farce requires a little more thought. And seeing as we move up towards the highest level of comedy, each level requires more knowledge. One of the funniest films ever made, and it's critics, directors, almost anyone who's seen the movie will put it in their top 10 list. It's the film Some Like It Hot. And in Some Like It Hot, they give a great example of plot device, which is also called mistaken identity. Plot device or mistaken identity. In this level of comedy, the humor comes from the story. Okay? A lot of actors who go to auditions will sometimes pick monologues from plays that use mistaken identity or plot device for their humor. And they don't work as audition pieces because when taken out of context of the story, they're not funny. The reason they're funny is we learn something in the beginning of the play, and as we learn this information, it makes the joke work later. Shakespeare did this a lot in his comedies. In a lot of his comedies, characters will be disguised as something else. And that is the reason it is funny. In his comedy As You Like It, you have a woman who falls in love with a young man. She sees him wrestle, and she falls deeply in love with him. But the young man his father had been an enemy to her uncle, the Duke. And the Duke kicks him out of their country, and the young man has to leave. And she is so in love with him that she has to follow. And her cousin, the Duke's daughter, tells her that you can't go alone as a woman out into the forests. That is not acceptable, and it wouldn't have been acceptable at that day and time for a woman to travel alone. So the girl dresses as a man. She hides her hair and she puts on men's clothing. Her cousin goes with her, so they go as a couple, again, for protection, and they head off out into the country so she can find this young man that she loves. All the humor in the play comes from the fact that she is disguised as a man. In this comedy, in Mistaken Identity or Plot Device, the audience is in on the joke. The characters in the play are not. And so what happens is she runs into a shepherdess who is angry at her boyfriend, wannabe, a shepherd who really loves her. And she's telling the boy off in disguise. The girl goes up to her, tells the other girl what a fool she is, how stupid she is, and then she walks away. Of course, she's dressed as a man. Well, the shepherdess falls just madly instantly in love with her because no man has ever had the guts to chide her in that way. And she has to have this pretty young man. Later, the lady goes on, she finds her lover. She does not reveal who she is. She's still dressed as a man. They talk about women. The man, her lover, admits that he does not know how to talk to ladies. And so she says, I'll give you a lesson. In fact, I'll give you a lesson on kissing. And he's like, oh, God, you're a dude. I mean, we're going to kiss. And, oh, yes, let's practice. Again, the audience is in on the joke. The characters are not. You see that again and again in a lot of Shakespeare's plays. But getting back to the film, Some Like It Hot, that whole story throughout the film, it's about plot device and mistaken identity. In that movie, you have the two main characters, Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis, are out-of-work musicians. They go to get a job. They go to their agent. The agent tells them, I have nothing for you long term. Too bad you're not women, because there is a band leaving for Florida, and they need two musicians who play the instruments you play. If you were women, I could give you a long-term job. All I have is a birthday party. They need some musicians tonight to play for it. It's out of town. And the guy said, well, we can get a car. We'll borrow a car, and we'll go to this event and play for it. Any money's better than none. So they go to the garage where this car is supposed to be to walk in on the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Now, that's when two gangs in the 1920s were having a gang war, and a bunch of gang members were murdered in the garage, and they walk in on this. They are seen, they're chased by the gang, but they get away, and the way that they try to escape and to get a job is they decide to dress as women musicians. And they're going to go on a train ride that's going to take them to Florida. And as the one character says to the other, when we get there, we can ditch these costumes and we'll get away from the mob. Well, turns out they really like dressing as women because they're surrounded by women. And second, the one falls madly in love with the singer of the orchestra, the big band, and she's played by Marilyn Monroe. It is hilarious. They have to keep switching back and forth from male costumes to female, and then back again. They're being chased by gangsters. They're trying to hide the fact that they are men while they are in the presence of women. It's very, very funny. There are a couple scenes. I'm going to put the link up here for you. This is when they're getting on the train, and when they're after they've had a rehearsal where they help Marilyn Monroe's character from being kicked out of the band. There's a great scene where Jack Lemmon, dressed as a woman, is asleep in his bunk, and she, thinking Jack Lemmon is her friend, a woman, gets in bed with her, and his reactions to laying in bed with Marilyn Monroe are very, very funny. Watch that. Again, it's one of the best examples I can give you of plot device or mistaken identity. And I bet if you watch just a little of this movie, you're going to want to watch the whole thing because it is very, very funny. The last level of farce is called verbal wit. Verbal wit requires an understanding of language, or it's not funny. It comes from jokes, puns, use of language. All movies, all plays are filled with these, or comedies, they're filled with these. I mean, people have to speak, unless it's the silent movies. And there are a lot of comedians I could have you listen to. One of the things that I like, one type of verbal wit that I like is called a malapropism. Malapropism. Malapropism actually comes from a play done at the end of the Restoration period. It's a play called The Rivals by Sheridan. And in that play, there's a woman, a character named Mrs. Malaprop. She's a very wealthy woman. She's taking care of her niece. She doesn't like the fact that people think of her as old. She sees herself as being young. And every time a suitor comes to woo her niece, Mrs. Malaprop gets jealous and wants them to be in love with her. When she wants to impress people, she uses big words. Problem is, she has no idea what they mean. And so she says things in place, she says one word in place of another word. It sounds the same, but has a totally different meaning. We now call that a malapropism, and it comes from that play. That's the first recorded time we have of someone actually doing that. And some of the things, for example, that she says, at one point she's talking to the young captain who's come to see her niece, and she says, "Oh, Captain," she says, "I understand you were in Egypt." And he, yes. He says, "Oh, I bet it's wonderful to be in Egypt and to get to see allegories on the Nile." Of course, she uses the word allegory in place of alligator. Allegories on the Nile. That's a malapropism. She uses some other ones too. She refers to her niece as being supercilious at one point, and that is not what she means. She's trying to say the word superficial. And the play is filled with these malapropisms. A lot of great comedy groups use them. The Marx Brothers did. At one point in one of their films, Groucho Marx is playing Captain Spaulding, and he is talking to this lady he's trying to woo to get money from her. And she's played by Margaret Dumont. And Margaret Dumont's character says to him, she says, "Oh, Captain, you are so fascinating." And he goes, "Yes, I was fascinated right here." In other words, fascinated instead of vaccinated. Again, a malapropism. Groucho Marx did this all the time, and you'll find it again and again and again in their movies. Now, two of the best examples of verbal wit that you can see come from the comic group Abbott and Costello. Lou Costello and Bud Abbott loved using language, and they had a lot of fun. A lot of their verbal wit is just, I think, exceptional. I want you to watch two scenes. The first sketch I want you to see is from Abbott Costello's sketch called 7 into 28. It's where they do some really funky things with math. I think you'll really enjoy that. The second also deals with math or money, and it's called 2 10s for a 5. You can watch just about any Abbott and Costello routine on YouTube, and they're going to use verbal wit and it's going to be, as I said, exceptional. Probably the most famous routine they ever did, and it's one of the funniest routines in the history of comedy, and it's their routine called Who's On First. And you can find a lot of different versions of that. They did it in a film called The Naughty 90s, and they did it on their TV show, and they certainly did it live many, many times. So watch Abbott and Costello. You'll get an excellent example of verbal wit. Now, we're moving into high comedy. The lowest level of high comedy is called inconsistency of character. Inconsistency of character. In this level of comedy, a character is supposed to act one way, but they do not. They do not act the way someone in their position should act. If you've ever seen any of the Airplane movies, all of them are based on this kind of humor. Characters who are supposed to be serious airplane pilots do not act the way an airplane pilot should. They also, you see a lot of this in a lot of the Leslie Nielsen movies. I mean, whether he's playing Dracula or whether he's playing a police commissioner, whatever he's doing, totally wrong for whatever the character's supposed to be doing. The comic group from England, Monty Python, many of their sketches are based on this, whether it's someone coming into a cheese shop or someone trying to return a dead parrot. All their sketches, almost all their sketches, have to do with inconsistency of character. In fact, an example that I would love for you to watch is one of the members of Monty Python, John Cleese, and he's working with another actor who you have seen, an actor named Rowan Atkinson. Rowan Atkinson has been on many different television shows. His most famous character is probably Mr. Bean. Well, in this sketch, Rowan Atkinson plays a TV interviewer, and John Cleese plays a beekeeper. And Rowan Atkinson will do everything that a good television announcer would never do. And the sketch is called The Beekeeping Sketch. Please watch that. It will give you it is brilliant, and it will really show you what I mean by inconsistency of character. The next level of high comedy is called the comedy of ideas. The comedy of ideas. In the comedy of ideas, the playwright, or the screenwriter, the director, the playwright has an agenda. They believe in something. They have strong feelings about something. And they are using philosophy, they are using debate, whatever it may be, to explore that topic. And hopefully, in their minds, by doing that comedy, they're making you aware of something. Now again, this is high comedy because we really have to know a lot about the world. We have to know a lot about politics. We have to know a lot about religion, philosophy, or some of this is not funny. Again, the higher we go, the more intelligent the person needs to be, at least the more education they need to have, the more experiences they need to have. In the comedy of ideas, one of my favorite writers for the comedy of ideas is Woody Allen. Woody Allen, whether it's in his stand-up or in his films, often goes to the comedy of ideas and works that into the story. One of his ongoing themes that you see, I've seen it in his short stories, I've also seen it in his movies, is Woody Allen questions what happens to us when we die. Is there a God? He talks about this in one of his short stories. I read a number of years ago, it's called Mr. Big, and in it you have a film noir type detective who tries to find out if God is dead. And in the course of the story, interviews religious leaders, philosophers. And if you have studied in college, if you took a basic philosophy class, almost every philosopher that is named is brought up, their ideas are brought up in that one little short story, and in a very amusing way. He also has a film that I love called Love and Death. Takes place when Napoleon attacks Russia. It's set up, the whole movie's set up based on a Russian novel. And Woody Allen plays a character who gets caught up in the war, doesn't want to be. In fact, he tries really hard not to be in the war, but he ends up being tried and is going to be executed for spying on Napoleon. And it's very, very funny. But the whole beginning of the film, Woody Allen asked the question again, what happens when we die? What happens? Who are we? Why are we on this earth? What is the meaning of life? And he does it in a very amusing way. I want you to watch a comedian. His name is Lewis Black. You probably have heard of him. Lewis Black appears on The Daily Show from time to time. He also does a lot of stand-up. But his segment on The Daily Show is called Back in Black. And he rants when he does Back in Black. He rants about different things. The one that I want you to watch, he is ranting about video games. Again, the comedian, the playwright, whoever it is, has an idea about something. They believe something. And they want to express their belief. And no one is better at that than Lewis Black. Check it out. Lewis Black, his rant on video games from Back in Black. I hope that you enjoy that. There are a lot of humorists out there, both conservative and liberal, who use the comedy of ideas in their routines. A lot of political humor comes from the comedy of ideas. Now, the last level of comedy and the highest level of comedy is satire. In satire, the playwright uses wit and irony and exaggeration. Again, this is usually exaggerated in some way. Wit, irony, and exaggeration to expose evil, whatever they think evil is. Wit, irony, and exaggeration to expose evil. Satire can be political. It can also be social. I'm a playwright. I believe there is a problem in society. I'm going to show you this satire. We're going to poke fun at that problem. You're going to laugh at it. And then, hopefully, I will put a message in your head, and you'll want to go out and do something about it. You're going to, now that the evil has been exposed, you're going to want to change the world. You're going to want to change that evil. Okay. Satire has been with us since the Greeks, and it gets done a lot. I think the best satire that has ever been written and performed is from a film. It came out in 1940, and it was by Charlie Chaplin. It's the very first time that Charlie Chaplin actually spoke in a film. And the movie is called The Great Dictator. The Great Dictator, Charlie Chaplin. It is a satire that looks at the evils of the Nazis. In the movie, Charlie Chaplin sets up a country. We know from the first, he's talking about Germany. He's talking about Nazi Germany. And the main character, though he's called Hinkle, is Adolf Hitler. Charlie Chaplin plays that character. He looks exactly like Adolf Hitler. Another one of the fascist dictators of that time, Benito Mussolini, is also represented. Again, he's from a country. They don't call it Italy, but we know they're talking about Italy. We know this is Mussolini, though he is not called Mussolini. And in the story, Chaplin begins to show the audience a lot of the evil of the Nazis at a time when a lot of people, though they were hearing things, were not quite believing that the Nazis were that evil. Though World War II had begun, people would not believe that the Nazis were doing horrible things to the Jews and gypsies and other groups. People would not believe, they could not allow themselves to believe of the goals for Hitler and the Nazis, their dream of world domination. See, this is a time the United States is not yet in the war. There were people in the United States who were pro-German. There was a Nazi party in the United States, and it was pretty strong. There was also a Communist Party in the United States, which was also very strong, coming out of the Great Depression. And many people in America just wanted to sit on the fence. They did not want to be involved in another world war. Charlie Chaplin, in this movie, was telling us these Nazis are evil. They are doing horrible things, and they have horrible plans for the world. We should be at war. We should end this before it's too late. He puts this in a movie. He made his point. The German government was so incensed that they sent a note to the United States and said, we cannot have this happen. If we are friends, if our countries are not at war and we are friends, you will end this movie immediately. You will not allow it to be shown in your movie theaters. And there were protests of pro-German people all across the United States at movie theaters, and the movie was shut down. They did not allow it to be shown. A year later, we enter World War II. Just a couple years after that, we begin to find out about the atrocities committed against the Jews. And people realized that Charlie Chaplin was right. We had turned our backs on the evil that was the Nazi Party, the evil that was Adolf Hitler, and we shouldn't have done that. This movie is incredible. There's several wonderful scenes in it that you should watch, and I'm going to put up a connection to those scenes. Please watch this. I think it is just as relevant today as it ever was. It's one of these movies that you will laugh and laugh and laugh, and then wonder why you're laughing. And that quite often happens with satire. So, the comedy continuum, we start at our lowest level, obscenity, and it ends with satire, the highest level of comedy. Obscenity, no thought required. Satire, much thought required. And this is the reason when you talk to someone and they go, well, I didn't find that funny. Either they did not understand it, or maybe it was too close to them. So, it's hard to do, but don't get upset with somebody because their humor is not the same as yours. It's very personal, and it always will be. And with that, I'm done talking about comedy, and I'll see you again soon.